An unexpected blizzard swept down the mountains and swallowed the quiet town of Elkridge in white silence. It had come early, too early for anyone to be ready. Streets disappeared beneath the snow, roofs moaned under the weight, and trees bent low as if bracing for something far worse than cold. Inside a modest home at the edge of town, Lena Brooks stirred a pot of soup on the stove. The warmth of the kitchen contrasted sharply with the chaos outside. She was 31, a head nurse who rarely got a full day off. This was supposed to be one of the few calm moments she could spend with her son, Caleb, 6 years old, soft-voiced, dreamy-eyed, with a mind full of imaginary lands and heroes only he could see. She smiled as she peeked out the frosted window. Caleb was in the yard, bundled in his too big snow jacket, laughing as he stomped through the powdery snow, dragging a stick like a sword. He was building something. Maybe a snow fort, maybe a dragon lair. With Caleb, it could be both. Lena turned back to the stove, adjusting the flame. Just 5 more minutes and she'd call him in. Just 5. Then it happened. A violent gust of wind screamed against the house, shaking the walls. The door, poorly latched, burst open with a bang. Cold air rushed in like an unseen force had punched through their sanctuary. Lena's heart skipped. Instinct kicked in. She ran to the door. "Caleb?" she called out. No answer. The yard that had moments ago echoed with her son's laughter was now hauntingly quiet. The wind was louder than anything she had ever heard. Louder than sirens at the hospital. Louder than the monitor flatlining. It tore at her coat as she stepped outside, eyes scanning frantically. "Caleb!" she screamed. The snow stung her face, blurring her vision, but then, there they were. Tiny footprints, half-covered already, leading toward the forest. No hesitation, no time to think, only fear. Raw, breathless fear. She grabbed her coat tighter and followed the trail, praying it wouldn't vanish before she caught up. Her shoes slipped on the ice, the trees swallowed her whole, but none of it mattered. Her son was out there, somewhere, alone, and no blizzard in hell would stop her from finding him. The forest didn't feel scary at first. To Caleb, it felt like something out of one of his dreams. Quiet, soft, almost magical. The trees stood tall and still, their branches heavy with snow, like ancient giants frozen in time. He had wandered past the fence behind the house, following a sound he thought he recognized. "Daddy?" he had whispered. The voice was faint, like wind through leaves, but to Caleb it was real. His dad had died when he was 3. He didn't remember much, just the feeling of being held, the smell of his jacket, the lullaby he never quite forgot. But now he was certain his dad had called to him. Not from heaven, not from memory, but from the woods. So he followed. The snow deepened with every step. It tugged at his boots, filled the spaces around his ankles. Still, he trudged on, dragging his toy shovel behind him like a sword. His breath puffed in small clouds, his cheeks burned red. At first, it was an adventure. He was going to find Daddy. He was going to bring him back home, surprise Mama. But magic has a way of turning cruel in the cold. The trees began to blur. The voice that had guided him faded into the storm. Snowflakes stung his eyes. His gloves, ones his mom had hurriedly pulled on earlier, soaked through. His fingers started to feel fuzzy, his legs heavy. He stopped. He looked around, but the world had changed. It was all white now, no footprints, no house, no familiar shapes. Just trees that all looked the same, their branches swaying like they were whispering secrets he couldn't hear. He knelt down, trying to dig a small cave beside a fallen log. In his mind, it was going to be his snow fort, just like the ones he and Mama had built before the move, just like the ones where she told him he was safe. But the snow didn't cooperate. His hands slipped, his arms gave out. The cold had crept beneath his coat, wrapped around his chest like a belt pulled too tight. He curled into himself, his small body trembling. "Mama?" he breathed, the word barely leaving his lips, his vision blurred with tears he couldn't feel. His mittens were stiff now. He couldn't remember what warmth felt like. The storm howled louder, like it was angry or laughing. Caleb's eyes fluttered. He was so tired. Maybe he'd rest just for a second. Maybe... Woof, his heart jumped. A bark. Clear, deep, real. Then again, closer this time, and again, through the swirling white, a shape moved, large, dark, alive. Caleb's fingers twitched. He wasn't alone, not anymore. At the edge of town, past the snow-blanketed road and behind a rusting chain-link gate, sat a quiet, aging rescue center. Inside one of its back kennels lay Bruno, a 13-year-old German Shepherd with a graying muzzle, stiff legs, and one clouded eye that no longer saw the world as clearly as it once had. He had served nearly a decade as a canine search and rescue dog. Mountains, floods, earthquakes. Bruno had been there. But time had slowed him down, and when his joints began to fail, the department retired him. He'd been brought here to rest, they said. But Bruno had never been made for rest. That night, as the storm screamed through the valley, something shifted. He stood, slowly, painfully, then sniffed the air, nostrils flaring against the icy wind that slipped through the cracks of the kennel. It was faint, buried beneath snow and cold and distance. But to Bruno, it was unmistakable, the scent of a child and the scent of fear. No hesitation, no handler, no leash. He pressed against the weak latch, pushing until the gate groaned open. And then Bruno ran. He didn't know where he was going, but his heart did. His paws, though worn, pounded through the snow like they had years ago. He followed the fading trail, winding through trees and drifts, deeper into the woods until finally, there, a small figure, curled tight, barely moving. Bruno slowed, ears pricked forward, body low. He nudged the boy's side with his nose. No response, only shallow breaths. Too big to carry, too cold to leave. So Bruno did what he'd never been trained to do. He laid down beside the boy, pressing his body against Caleb's, curling around him as tightly as his aching frame would allow. He barked once, then again, though the storm swallowed the sound. But he didn't stop. Bruno, the forgotten hero, had found someone worth remembering. The storm showed no mercy. It howled through the trees with a voice like thunder, whipping snow in violent spirals around the two figures lying still beneath the branches. Bruno's body trembled, not from fear, but from the creeping cold that had found its way into his bones. His joints ached, his paws burned, then went numb. Each breath he took felt heavier than the last, but he didn't move. He couldn't, not while the boy was still breathing. Caleb was barely conscious. His small chest rose in slow, uneven motions. Every few minutes, his fingers twitched or his lips parted in a faint murmur, signs that he was still fighting, that he was still there. And Bruno stayed. He pressed his aging frame tighter against the boy, adjusting just enough to block the wind from Caleb's face. The snow piled on their backs, ice crusted Bruno's fur. His good eye blinked slowly, but he refused to sleep. He barked again, once, twice, but the wind swallowed it whole. This wasn't about duty anymore. Bruno wasn't obeying commands or chasing praise. He had long forgotten the voice of his old handler. What drove him now wasn't instinct or habit. It was love, quiet, pure, wordless. Somewhere in the darkness between the pain and exhaustion, Bruno felt it. Caleb's heartbeat, faint but there, pressed against his own. And that was enough. So the old dog stayed, not because he was trained to, but because he couldn't bear to let the boy die alone. The storm began to break just after dawn. The wind, once howling with the fury of a living thing, finally fell into a tired hush. Sunlight crept cautiously over the ridge, casting a pale golden hue across the snow-covered forest. What had once been a battlefield of white chaos now lay eerily still, silent, like the storm had never happened, like it had taken a breath and disappeared. But not before leaving its mark. Lena's boots crunched over frozen ground, her lungs burning from hours of screaming Caleb's name into a void that never answered. Her voice was raw, cracked with desperation. Around her, volunteers fanned out in pairs, combing the woods in silence, eyes sharp, steps urgent. No one dared speak hope aloud. They had been searching since midnight. The cold had stolen time, and every minute gone without finding Caleb felt like a sin. Then a voice broke the stillness. "Over here!" Lena froze. Her heart slammed in her chest. Two shapes. Someone's here. She stumbled through the snow, legs shaking, forcing herself forward even as her vision blurred with frost and fear. When she reached the spot, time stopped. There, half buried in a shallow snowbank beneath a tree, was a shape. No, two. A boy's tiny form curled tightly under the body of a large dog, both motionless, both covered in layers of ice and frost. "Caleb!" Lena screamed. She dropped to her knees, brushing snow off his face with trembling hands. His cheeks were pale, lips tinged blue, but he was breathing, shallow, fragile, but alive. Her tears came fast, falling onto his still warm forehead as she gathered him into her arms. "You're okay," she whispered, voice breaking. "Mama's here. I've got you, baby. I've got you." And then her eyes shifted to the dog. His body was wrapped tightly around Caleb's, as if even in near death he'd refused to let the cold touch the boy. His fur was stiff with ice, his chest barely rose, his one good eye was closed, the other clouded and blind. Lena reached out, her hand hovering above his matted coat. "Please don't leave my son," she whispered, not knowing why she said it, only that something in her soul demanded it. "Please don't go now. You found him. Don't leave him yet." The dog didn't move, but a soft exhale barely audible escaped his nose. He was still fighting. One of the paramedics dropped to her side, assessing Caleb. Another wrapped Lena in a blanket she didn't even feel. The team worked fast, lifting Caleb onto a stretcher, preparing to carry him out. Lena turned back to the dog. "We're taking him too," she said, voice steady despite the storm still screaming inside her chest. "He comes with us." And no one argued. As the sun broke higher through the treetops, two stretchers moved out of the forest. One carrying a little boy who had been found in the arms of hope, the other a dog who had given everything to keep that hope alive. The hospital room was warm and quiet, the hum of monitors steady like a heartbeat that had never stopped. Thick blankets were layered over Caleb's small body, wires taped gently to his arms, oxygen tubes tucked near his nose. The doctors said hypothermia had slowed everything, his pulse, his breathing, even his thoughts. But they also said something else. He survived longer than any child should have in that cold. Someone kept him alive. Lena sat beside his bed, fingers wrapped around his tiny hand, not daring to let go. Her eyes were red, not just from exhaustion, but from a kind of fear that lingers long after the danger has passed. The kind that doesn't vanish when the sun comes up. She had come so close to losing him, and part of her still hadn't accepted that she hadn't. Then Caleb stirred. His eyelashes fluttered against pale skin, and he shifted slightly under the weight of the blankets. Lena leaned forward, breath caught in her throat. "Caleb?" she whispered. His lips parted, dry and cracked. His voice came out small, raw. But it wasn't what she expected. "I heard Dad's voice, but the dog brought me back." Lena's heart stuttered. Her breath hitched. Not Mom, not where am I, or what happened, but Dad and the dog. She brushed his hair back gently, fighting the tears pressing behind her eyes. "I know, baby," she said, voice shaking. "I know." Across the hallway, in the small emergency vet room the hospital had made available on short notice, Bruno lay motionless. He was hooked to an IV, a warm pad beneath him. One eye remained closed, the other half-lidded but dim. The vet had said his heart was weak, his kidneys were failing, his age and the cold had nearly taken him. He shouldn't have survived either, the vet told Lena, but sometimes will outruns biology. No one came to claim him, no microchip, no collar. Just an old service record and a body full of scars and stories. He had lived a life of purpose and then been forgotten, until now. Lena stood at the foot of his cot, watching his slow, labored breaths. She remembered the way he had curled around her son, the way his body had been the only shield between Caleb and the storm, not as a tool, not out of training, but out of love. Her hands trembled as she knelt down beside him. She didn't speak, she just placed her hand gently on his paw, cold but not lifeless, and in that silence something passed between them, an understanding, an agreement without words. Bruno wasn't just a dog. He was the reason her son was still alive. He had followed a sound only he could hear. He had made a choice. He had stayed when most wouldn't have. And Lena knew. He belonged with them now. Bruno didn't live forever. No hero does. But he lived long enough to watch Caleb laugh again, chase leaves in the yard, and run without fear. He lived to hear the boy's voice grow stronger, to feel his arms wrap around his neck each morning like a promise. Lena never called him a pet, and Caleb never saw him as one. In every photo that followed on birthdays, lazy Sundays, first days of school, Bruno was there, always in the middle, always watching, always home. He became more than a dog. He became a thread sewn into their lives, holding them together where things had once broken apart. Years passed in quiet moments, and Bruno aged with grace. His steps grew slower, his muzzle turned white, but his eyes, his one good eye, still lit every time Caleb whispered his name. Then, one autumn morning, with golden leaves drifting outside their window, Bruno lay down at the foot of Caleb's bed and didn't rise. His breaths were soft, spaced apart, the kind that carry meaning without sound. Caleb, now older, knelt beside him, tears welling but not falling. He didn't cry, not yet. He pressed his forehead gently to Bruno's and whispered, just loud enough for the fading dog to hear, "I know now, you were sent to me." Bruno's tail gave one last thump, and then peace. Not the end, just the final chapter of a love that had never needed words. Love doesn't always speak. It doesn't announce itself with grand gestures or perfect timing. It doesn't need a common language, a matching bloodline, or even a future. Sometimes love is simply presence. A quiet decision to stay when leaving would be easier. That night, Bruno didn't have instructions. He wasn't guided by a whistle or a command. He didn't belong to anyone anymore. No badge, no handler, no reason to keep running through the cold. But he did. Because something inside him, something old and steady, recognized the sound of a child in need. And that was enough. He didn't carry Caleb out. He didn't bark for help loud enough to shake the trees. What he did was more powerful. He stayed. He lay there in the dark, in the cold, and gave every ounce of warmth, of will, of life he had left. Not because someone asked, but because his heart said, "Not this child, not tonight." Bruno wasn't a miracle by nature. He had broken ribs, a bad eye, scars hidden beneath fur that told of years spent rescuing others. But that night, as snow fell endlessly around them, he became one. A miracle doesn't have to shine. Sometimes it's just something that refuses to give up. Something that says, "You are not alone," without ever making a sound. And sometimes that something has 4 legs, a graying coat, and a heart braver than most.